In Luke 9:23, Jesus says some things that if we're honest, we probably wish he didn't say. I mean, we love when Jesus talks about grace and forgiveness and the abundant life that he came to give us, but when he starts talking about denying yourself or picking up your cross, we don't like that quite as much. But I would encourage you to lean into this for a minute. Because while it's uncomfortable, while we might not like it, it's actually a powerful lesson that we need. Because this is an important principle of our faith. And so in this video, we're going to break down what it means to take up your cross daily. And we're also going to look at how this practically applies to our everyday lives. Let's start by looking at what this verse actually says. Then he said to them all, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me." Let's start by looking at the context in which we find these words. In Luke 9, Jesus is teaching his disciples, and they've been following him for a while, but they're still kind of struggling to understand who Jesus is and what he's about. And in Luke 9, Jesus is teaching his disciples that he came to die and to suffer. And this is in contrast to what they thought the Messiah would do and be. You see, the religious leaders and even the disciples, they thought the Messiah was going to come to rescue them from their earthly problems. You see, the nation of Israel, they were being oppressed by the Romans. And they thought Jesus, the Messiah, would come to restore the nation of Israel, to kick the Romans out, to deal with all the problems they have, and so that they would be elevated and all the rest of the world would look at them with jealousy. They thought the Messiah was coming to deal with their earthly problems, but the issue was, that's not what Jesus came to do. In fact, he came to do something much greater, but that meant that there might be some suffering and some difficulty, some denying of yourself before that would happen. And so what we see in Luke chapter 9 is Jesus is trying to say, this is what I came to do. And this is what it means for you to be my disciple. Let's take a look at what Luke 9:23 means. Jesus starts off this verse with a statement. Whoever wants to be my disciple. In other words, if you want to follow Jesus, if you want to be his disciple, if you want to raise your hand and say, I'm in, I want to be a Christian, a Christ follower, what comes out of his mouth next is what you have to do. And remember the context here. Jesus is trying to correct some wrong thinking about who he is and what he came to do. And I think much of this is prevalent today. We still often think Jesus came to make our lives here on this earth great. And listen, he did come to make your life full of joy and full of peace, but there's also some difficult teachings in that as well. And Jesus is trying to correct that in his disciples 2,000 years ago and in our lives today. And the first thing that Jesus tells his disciples is that if you want to follow me, you have to deny yourself. You have to put aside your selfish ambition. You have to put aside where your life was going so that you can pick up what Jesus has for you. You have to deny yourself. And now this is easier said than done, because it might be easy to deny yourself for a day or two, but as time goes on, our sinful nature, our selfish nature comes back to the surface. And for followers of Jesus, we have to continually deny ourselves. And you might be asking, why? Why do I have to give up all this other stuff? And it's because you can't serve two masters. Jesus is going this direction, and your sinful nature is going this direction. And you have to decide, who are you going to follow? You can't follow both. You have to pick a lane. And Jesus is saying is, if you want to follow me, you have to actually follow me, which means denying this over here. So the first thing we have to do if we want to follow Jesus is to deny ourselves. Next, Jesus builds on this, and he says you have to take up your cross daily. So if we want to follow Jesus, we have to pick up our cross in order to follow him. Now, this idea of picking up our cross has become really misunderstood in our culture. It's just kind of become slang that we say when we have a difficult or a thankless job or something challenging we're going through in life. We just say, it's just my cross to bear. It's just my burden to carry. But really, this image goes much further than that. You You see, the cross was an instrument of death. It was a method of execution in the ancient world, and Jesus is pointing to something much deeper. And I love how Mark Moore summed this up. In Roman culture, no one would ever be so crass to turn a cross into a trinket to be worn around your neck or hung from the mirror of your car. It was an instrument of excruciating torture and death. Everyone who picked up the cross embarked on a one-way journey from which he would never return. We notice too that crucifixion was the Roman mode of execution, not the Jewish mode, which would have been stoning. Thus, Jesus' words are prophetic and personal. Jesus here is painting a challenging picture that to follow him, we have to pick up our cross to die to ourselves. The cross was painful and excruciating, and sometimes following Jesus will be the same. Denying yourself can be painful, but we have to put to death those things because ultimately they don't lead to God. If we want the peace and the joy and the abundant life that God has for us, we have to put to death our old way of living. And that can be painful. But to follow Jesus, this is a necessary step. And we have to believe that the life on the other side of that pain is worth it. And so we have to pick up our cross daily, every day choosing to put to death our old life so that we can grab a hold of what Jesus has for us. Jesus ends this verse with a simple, follow me. After we've denied ourselves, after we've picked up our cross, then we are ready to follow Jesus. And maybe you're wondering at this point, like, why would I want to follow Jesus? If this is what it entails, why would I actually want to follow him? And again, it goes back to because the life on the other side of that pain is worth it. The life on the other side is worth it. Think about the things that you're pursuing in this world that you value. Are those really bringing you life? Or are they causing a slow and painful death? Do they leave you wanting more? Do they truly fulfill you? Because what Jesus is saying, if you die to this, I will give you true life, abundant life. I will give you peace and joy, but you got to pick up your cross and deny these things in order to get that. I think it's kind of like childbirth, right? Like that's a really painful process. But the life that comes on the other side of it is so incredibly worth it, which is why many women willingly choose to have multiple kids because they learn that the pain of childbirth is worth the life and the joy that come on the other side. And I think the same is true in our walk with Jesus. When we go through the painful process of picking up our cross every single day to die to these other things, it's hard, it's painful, but the life he gives us on the other side is so worth it. So why do we pick up our cross? So that we can experience the life and the joy and the peace that God has for us. Luke 9:23 shows us that to follow Jesus, there is a cost. It will cost us a lot, but what we gain is infinitely greater than what we lose. And I want to end by looking at 5 different ways that we can apply Luke 9:23 to our everyday lives. I think the first one is this. It's a question. Do I want Jesus or my own way? You have a choice to make. Do I want Jesus or do I want to pursue these other things that I'm more interested in? Jesus will never force you to follow him. You have to choose that. And so what do you want? Do you want to pursue the things of this world? Or do you want the abundant life of Christ? Because if you want this abundant life of Christ, you need to be willing to pick up your cross in order to get it. But the choice is yours. Do you want Jesus or your own way? The second lesson that we can learn from Luke 9:23 is that we need to let go of what we desire. That's what Jesus is talking about when he says, deny yourself. Because the reality is we can't hold on to 2 competing things. We can't hold on to the things of this world and to what Jesus has for us. And I would argue that when we hold on to the things of this world, we're actually settling for something less than what God has for us. Because what God has for you is far greater than anything this world can offer you. So let go of this so that you can grab a hold of the abundant life that he has for you. And I love how C.S. Lewis sums this up. He says it this way: "It would seem that our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures, fooling around with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us. Like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. We are far too easily pleased." The third lesson from this verse is that we need to die to ourself. And I know this isn't a pleasant picture, but I think it's a necessary picture. Because on one hand, we can see how we have to deny these things so we can grab hold of Jesus, but in practice, it gets a lot more messy, a lot more difficult, a lot more challenging. That's why Jesus says we need to put to death. We need to pick up our cross. We need to be ruthless in our pursuit of Jesus because we recognize these things, they don't actually give us life. Only he does that. And so we put those to death. And I would just encourage you to think about the things in your life. What do you need to put to death? What is it that you need to ruthlessly eliminate from your life because it's not leading you to Jesus, it's leading you to something else, and it's taking away from the life that Jesus has for you? What do you need to put to death? The fourth lesson from Luke 9:23 is that this is a daily process. I think it's interesting that Jesus doesn't just say pick up your cross, but rather pick up your cross daily. In other words, this isn't a one-time event. Our old and our sinful nature has this habit of coming back up day after day after day. And so we don't pick up our cross once, we pick up our cross every single day, reminding ourselves that what Jesus has for us is better. So every day we're going to put to death these other things so that we can grab a hold of the abundant life that God has for us. So I would encourage you every day, create some kind of reminder that today you're going to pick up your cross and pursue what Jesus has for you. And finally, the last lesson we can learn is to step into the life that God has for you. Listen, what God has for you is love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness. It's what he has for you. And if those are the things you want, you have to follow him by picking up your cross. But I would encourage you, don't look at what you're giving up, but look at what you're gaining. What God has for you is so much greater than anything else that you would put to death. And I think we understand this process in some other areas of our life. If you want to get in shape, you go to the gym and you cause pain to yourself. If you have a disease in your body, you have to go into surgery and get it cut out, and that's painful, but you get life on the other side of that. And it's important when we are looking at what it means to follow Jesus that we look at what we're gaining, not what we're losing. Because what we're gaining is so infinitely greater than anything that we give up. So I would encourage you, as you pick up your cross, keep your eyes to Jesus and see what he has for you, because he has an incredible life. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that it challenged and encouraged you to follow Jesus, to pick up your cross daily so that you can grab a hold of the abundant life he has for you. If it did, would you leave a comment letting me know your thoughts? And also, don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you can stay up to date on future content that's coming out. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.